Buntovnik sa stilom, Erlend Lu duhovito i pomereno vivisecira tamnu stranu savremenog sveta, pa nije ni čudo što su tog sredovečnog autora sa Severa zavoleli najpre mladi sa Istoka i Zapada, a onda su se te knjige volšebno našle na policama njihovih roditelja. Njegove retke i kratke posete Beogradu uvek prate reke fanova, željnih da makar na sekund uživo vide pisca koji očarava galerijom otkačenih likova, društvenih odmetnika i instant pobunjenika, koji žele da žive van diktata građanskih regula i terora političke korektnosti. Rođen 1969. u Trondheimu u Norveškoj, Erlend Lu najpre je pravio kratke filmove i muzičke spotove, radio na psihijatrijskoj klinici, a zatim bio učitelj, novinar i prevodilac. 1993. objavio je svoj prvi roman Prohujalo sa ženom, koji je odmah postao kultni naslov čitave generacije, kao i knjige Naivan super, Doppler, Volvo kamioni, Mirni dani u Miksing Partu, dok njegov novi roman Kraj nama poznatog sveta osvaja knjižare širom Evrope. Erlend Lu otvara teme o kojima modern čovek nerado razmišlja, a još manje progovara. Nedostatak slobode u slobodnom društvu, usamljenost, teror novca i primat materijalnog, diktat da budete društveno korisni i uspešni, verni sluga nacije koji daje svoj doprinos u stvaranju najboljeg od svih svetova.
Norway is top ranked as a country where a lot of people would like to live. So is a comfortable and quiet and prosperous life a good material for a writer?
I think it is very good material for a writer. I happen to be born in Norway, and I think writers must write about what they know. Norway is what I know. I couldn't write about Serbia because I don't know it yet. And during my lifetime, I've seen Norway changed a lot. The same year that I was born, in 1969, oil was discovered, and there has been a tremendous growth of wealth, and the welfare state has been growing, and the sense of security that my grandparents or even parents did not have, we have now. It's total, and that comes with a lot of interesting feelings and questions, and I try to write about that.
Does good life make good people? It's something you write about, I think.
Well, it does, and it doesn't, because we are spoiled, and I think when you are spoiled, you forget where you came from, and that's a little bit happening in Norway and in Scandinavia. When you have the wealth, when you grow up in it, you don't see it, you don't understand it, you don't know where it came from. But when you're hungry, and then you do something. So Norway is a little bit in this danger zone, I would say.
Yes, you're right. That young people in Norway have everything, and that they have even more than they need. So you think it's not good to have more?
No, I don't.
Why?
Because it makes you blind. It makes you think that this is how the world is. And you don't see other people's problem, and you forget where you came from, and you forget your grandparents or your parents' struggles, and you think that this new telephone is the meaning of life, and it's not.
And what was your Norwegian childhood like?
Pretty normal. We didn't have any money. It was.
But you were born at the moment when Norway became rich.
Yeah, but this was in the very beginning. I mean, we weren't poor, but we were just normal people. We couldn't travel, on luxury vacations. We went to Denmark maybe once or twice, and that was super exotic for me. So today, when everyone is going, all over the world for a weekend or etc., it's another life, and not necessarily a good development.
There is a nice story about your parents and grandparents who didn't throw anything.
Yeah, that's true. But that goes, I would guess, for all these grandparents' generation, because they have actually experienced not to eat and not to have anything and not to have clothes, etc. So I think if you experience that, you never forget it. And my children, they have never experienced the lack of anything. You know, always enough food. If they really want something, they will get it sooner or later, and often very soon. That's problematic. I think a lot about that. How do you tell these children about the world?
What do you teach your children?
Well, I try to...
You have 3 sons? Yeah.
I have 3 sons. What can you teach children? I mean, they are what they are, and they are being brought up in this society where everything works. I try to read a lot to them. I show them movies from all periods, just to say that the world is really big. There's a lot of problem. You just have to find out about it, you know.
Doppler kjente at dette var mer enn han klarte å ta inn over seg. De forvirrede menneskesignalene han hadde flyktet fra, hoppet nå frem og tok kvelertak på ham. I skogen fantes ikke den typen signaler. Han hadde vært trygg der. Den lange skogsturen hadde vært en flukt fra menneskesignalene. En signalflukt. Men signalene var ikke forsvunnet, de hadde bare ligget på lur. Lumske som de hadde de hele tiden stått musestille og gledet seg til å kaste seg over ham når han kom tilbake og var på sitt skjøreste. Han hadde glemt hvor forvirrende det kunne være. Mennesker vil noe, så vil de det motsatte, så kanskje noe litt annet likevel. Så blir de sure hvis man ikke forstod at de egentlig ville noe annet enn de ga uttrykk for. Elger mye enklere å tolke, tenkte Doppler. De vil spise, de vil hvile. Det ikke noe hokus pokus.
Here it is, your new novel and the latest one about the Doppler. So it's the 3rd part of the trilogy about Doppler. So the name is The End of the World as We Know It. Could you say something at first about the title? Because it's really the end of the world as you know it.
For a few years I've been very interested in this survivalist movement, especially in the USA. You can see people, many thousands of people preparing for the end, you know, that's coming anytime. It can be, for various reasons. Some of these people also exist in Norway. So I wanted to play a little with this living in a super safe society and still preparing for Armageddon or the end. That interests me.
So your hero Doppler, he's coming back to society. So why does he come back to society? Or should we start by telling why did he leave the society?
Yeah, he left because he discovered that he had been living someone else's life. He hadn't thought enough about who he was, and he needed to be with himself. So he left his family and moved into the
but
forest.
Let's say first, he was perfect husband, he was perfect father.
Absolutely, he was
brilliant at his job. He was too brilliant.
It's good to be perfect and brilliant, but not too perfect and too brilliant. There is a line somewhere. It's not easy to see it. But for him, he crossed the line and he had to be on his own. And he wanted to get away from all these, you know, confusing human signals and just to be on his own. So that's why he left. And now...
So he left, he spent some couple of years in the forest, and now he's back. But it doesn't work. It's hard for him to live in society among people.
When he was alone, that was easy, you know. It was himself and this animal, this moose, and the forest. So that's a logic that he has no problem dealing with. But inside the family, it's all these signals at once. So what does the wife want, and what is she saying? Does it have double meanings, etc.? What does his children think, and what are their ambitions? It's quickly becoming too much for him.
But how did you write the end? How did you decide what would be the end of the novel?
Things like beginnings and endings, they are not there when I start writing. They appear. And then I have, you know, 200 things in between, I know I will have this one, I had this idea, I will use this here, but beginnings and endings, that's different. And this ending
is very apocalyptic, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely, but that's the whole idea. But I think also that it's beautiful, because in Norway we have a lot of discussions, because we have people from Romania coming, a lot of them, sitting to beg money in the street, and some political parties, you know, on the right side of the spectrum, they have been proposing to say no to this. And these people, every day they go from the center of Oslo into the forest. You know, it's like Doppler. They have camps in the forest, and from time to time the police have to move these camps. You cannot stay here. We are all the time moving problems around. We don't want to see them. We are pretending that everything's working. But in fact there is a lot of problems that we have to deal with. And one of these women from this Romanian beggar community, she meets Doppler and he meets her, and there's some kind of relationship forming, and I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing.
Are they the last men and women, or are they the first modern men and women after the end of the world as we know it?
Yeah, you can interpret that as you want.
Adam and Eve.
Yeah, in my thinking it was a beginning, you know, they are leaving society behind, walking out into the forest, starting a natural economy, and it's a start, it's not an ending.
We like to depict the heroes who are on the crossroad of their lives, or who are in front of the walls. And yet in your first novel, Gone with the Woman, you depict your hero who has love problems. So love is a kind of invasion for him.
When I was writing this first novel, I was very young. I was a very young man, and I was having problems myself dealing with this love. I was not brought up to be, you know, an alpha male, and it was difficult for me. How do you do this? How do I know what you really want, you know, as a woman? So I was dealing with this for a long time, and the result was this ironic story, you know, about a very weak man and a strong young woman. So it's a very natural story for me to write at the time.
In our prose, there is always that satirical and sardonic take on Norway society, on modern society. It's the same, I think. And in Naive Super, your hero, he decides to leave his studies because he finds out that the world is absurd. So you like to depict those heroes who feel lost in this world?
It comes very natural to me. I've had a lot of these feelings myself. I had, during my early 20s, I was completely in the same mental situation as the main character in Naive Super, thinking about, you know, where was my place, and the universe is so big, and what does it matter, and all these existential thoughts that you have sooner or later. And instead of being depressed, I could easily have become, you know, very dark-minded. I was able to transform all this into a novel, and into several novels. So that makes me...
In order to help yourself, no?
I think every writing process has an element of that. I'm not a very conscious writer. I get an idea and I follow the idea and I see what happens. Very often I think it's a game of intuition, and sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not so lucky, and I don't think writers all the time understand what we are doing.
You write about people who don't want to be successful, who choose not to be successful.
Yeah.
So what is success today in the modern world? And is it good to be successful or not?
It's good in your own life to be successful enough to have, you know, what you need. But to be successful and forget anything else and just grab all the, you know, luxury goods and money that you need, that's not a true
success for me. You know, that's a blind kind of success. If you measure everything by money, then you haven't really understood anything.
What is the role of money in our lives?
The role of money should be that we are able to have what we need to have a life that we're satisfied with, to have about the same as the others have. I think it's not necessary to have, you know, a house that's 20 times larger than your house and a lot of cars. But I can understand the need for it. If you come from poverty and get money, you just go crazy. I think your mind doesn't understand what's happening here. So it's normal, I can understand it, but it's still vulgar, and I think it's wrong.
After reading your books, I think those some notions to be redefined: success, money, and freedom. So what is freedom?
Well, that's a very complex
Because you write about a
question.
man who left society, who find a kind of freedom, living alone, but what is freedom in fact?
True freedom for me is to be able to do what I want, or something quite close to what I want, and at the same time make a decent living from it. I don't need to be super rich or anything, but to follow my possibilities. That's true freedom, you know, not to be captured in a situation that I do not control, where I have to be submissive to someone that I don't respect or like. That's captivity in a way, if it's mental or physical. Alle produktene måtte hurtig ut til steder hvor de kunne selges og komme i bruk, bli oppbrukt, hives, samles inn, resirkulert eller destruert, papir inn, papir ut, plast, gummi, metall, inn, ut, opp og ned, varer inn, avfall ut. Alt til lyden av reklamer som var laget for å generere mer forbruk, flere behov, nye produkter, flere produkter. Alt var på sinnrikt vis innrettet for konsum i høyt tempo. Det var også først og fremst derfor folk gikk rundt på gatene her, innså doppelet nå. De skulle til jobb, fra jobb, til eller fra utdanningsinstitusjoner som en gang ville føre dem til en jobb, slik at de kunne betale for husene og leilighetene, bilene og produktene de kom til å skaffe seg, uten å kunne betale kontant for dem, og for feriene de kom til å bestille til et eller annet sted hvor de kunne koble av og for en stakket stund glemme gjeldssirkelen de satt fast i, og som for de flestes tilfelle kom til å fortsette og siste fast i til døden skilte dem av.
I have impression that we live, or a lot of countries are living in a kind of modern slavery. That people are slaves of their jobs, of money.
But that's the case in Norway too, because houses are probably expensive everywhere. If you buy a house in Norway, you borrow money from the bank. Huh? And from that moment, it is a form of slavery. And it will continue for 20, 25 years until this is... But that's the contract we want to be in. Because we want these things, you know. We want all the material goods that everyone else has. Because today we define it success by these goods. It's not enough to be smart or beautiful or have an education or have an interesting job. If you don't have this phone and this and this and this, then you are not successful per definition. So that's, of course, it's slavery in a way.
You write about that kind of slavery with a lot of humor. So you're at the same time you are very optimistic and very pessimistic. When we laugh, that laugh is a little bit dark. So is humor a way to keep going on?
Yes, it's absolutely a way to keep going on, and I think humor is what saves us and has saved us from so many impossible situations. For me, humor is not a tool that I can pick from in a big toolbox where I could have chosen a lot of other ways of writing. It's woven into my ideas, and it's very often the very starting point. This darkness and this playing with known situations and you know, tweaking them, having fun with them. That's where it comes from. The absurdity is my way of looking at the world.
You don't write about politics, but you made a short film depicting the collapse of the left-wing parties in Scandinavia and the rise of the right-wing parties.
In Norway, there was a very stable social democracy while I was growing up. And the irony, of course, is that this social democracy that's been making all the social security systems that we are having today and enjoying today, they have given us so much material security that this material security now has become the aim in itself. And in this process, they haven't seen the rise of the even more vulgar, more right-wing parties. That's all about materialism. So it's a very strange process to look at.
What should be the ideal society? Do you have some utopia of yours?
No, I don't have any utopias. I think Scandinavia's working well, but I think we should be just very careful, with the rise of nationalism and being too much afraid of other people, other cultures. It's not a good way to go.
There is a lot of sound and fury of the history around you in Europe, in Asia. How do you see today's world with all those migrations and war conflicts and economic crisis and climate that is changing?
It's really strange times and hard times, and I think that the religious conflicts lying in the Middle East, they're horrible to watch, but I think they're necessary. I think they're going through similar things that Christianity went through a few hundred years ago, where it also went from being very dogmatic, and today it's more open. It's a necessary process, and it's a very painful process, and there's been a lot of wars in Europe dealing with this.
But do you have impression that Norway lives outside the history?
No, we don't. We're part of it. Norway is sharing the destiny of the rest of Europe. We're a part of it. We should be a part of it, even when there is trouble. So I think it's embarrassing that we are not a part of it. And I wanted us to be. But I think when we have the oil, it will not last forever. It makes us, in a way, of course, special, because we actually can stand alone. And we are standing alone. And people don't want other nations to interfere. It's problematic, but it's working. But we don't have any other plans for what happens when the oil runs out. And we also like to say that we are very climate, conscious nation, and don't look at our oil, but look at our clean air and our mountains. So the double standard is very disturbing.
It's a real privilege to be a writer. So you could write about all those lives you couldn't have lived. Why do you write?
I can't answer it in a good way, but there is a necessity in it. There is something I want to communicate. I don't know what it is. But I discover that for me, writing, also reading, sharing ideas, understanding ideas is the most important thing in my life, and I will continue to do it. But I can't answer why, really, I don't know.